All right, guys, just want to talk about procrastinating today and how we often let things affect us, but they can affect us in a negative or positive way. It's how we actually deal with it. That's the important bit. Um, for example, my learning Spanish is something that's taken a lot of time, um, and I think it's still going to take me about 6 months, but I've had to constantly adjust it to something that actually works, because a lot of it is done by training is done by academics, etc. So you, for example, when you went to school, you may have learned Spanish, English, French, but couldn't speak a word of any of the languages, even though you spent years doing it, because the system is sort of flawed in that front. Because you have bits of vocabulary, you have things like un lapin for French or hola for Spanish or whatever, but they don't really structure conversational stuff, which is where we learn most of our things. So the important bit for me was actually to sit there, and I know about 1,400 words so far in Spanish, but now I'm focusing on lots of sentences. Because when you think about it, when you learned English or whatever your native language is, it is normally from meeting people, listening to what people are saying, and it's not really grammatical until a later stage, because you already say your first words as a child through repetition, etc. But the grammar stuff comes far later, once you've already got a understanding and comprehension of a lot of the English language or whatever language you speak. So the point being is, the negative side on this is you can say, I'm not learning, it doesn't seem to be working, it doesn't, you know what, it doesn't work properly for most people, but a lot of it's down to the way people are actually teaching people. You know, they'll sell you a course that you can learn it in 7 days or 3 months or whatever, when in reality it takes longer, but a lot of the courses aren't structured correctly anyway. So the point being is, a lot of it is marketing, sell. But if you sit there and go, right, I need to learn this, I'm going to learn it, and adjust it to make it happen, you'll get there. And the reason I choose Spanish to talk about today, because it's learning a new language, which often isn't the easiest thing. But in life, there are many things that come along that we can make a decision over. Another one, for example, is when you're in a business and have reached a glass ceiling. A glass ceiling is often where you can't get promoted above that because A, nepotism, B, you don't have the right skills, C, you've reached where your job can actually basically reach in that business. Now, you can either see that as a positive or negative. The positive side being is, if you're quite happy being there, doesn't matter. The positive side being, if you can't go any higher and you want to go higher, what do you need to do to get to the next level? In some cases, it's go and do a degree. Other cases, it's change businesses. Because that's one of the easiest ways of getting promoted these days, is actually swapping companies. You move to another company in a higher position. You just apply to them until you get one that takes you. But the whole point is, if you just go, well, I can't get any higher than this, I give up, sort of thing. Well, the only person you're affecting is yourself. Everybody else couldn't care less. That's the reality of it. Otherwise, the glass ceiling wouldn't be there. You know, at the end of the day, you can only turn around and push yourself forward. A lot of time, no one else is going to do it for you, especially if you look at things like LinkedIn, which is the mecca of self-loathing. You've got to put yourself forward, and you've got to recognize if something's holding you back. And it's a bit like when people get ill or something, you can use it as a positive or negative. An example of that, a friend of mine got cancer recently, and he took 2 views on it, but then went off on the right one. The first one is, it was like, initially it was that shock, horror, and end of life is coming, and it was very negative and no interest in moving forward. Then it was sort of like dust himself off and move forward, adjust his life to suit the changes that may occur. You know, the point being is, he took a less stressful job. He took a job he could do predominantly from home. He took a job where he could actually get time off and stuff for any treatments or stuff he needed. He basically restructured his entire life in a positive aspect. Don't get me wrong, this is not somebody who's given up and just decided to take a simpler view on life. It was actually a kickstart of heading in the right direction, because up until that point his thoughts are about the mortgage, his wife, the car, all the bills, all that sort of stuff. And it moved from that to going to Portugal to play golf, to having more time to spend with his wife and his kids, to enjoying life more, and seeing that he'd spent a lot of time building a business up, that quite simply, even if he wanted to sell the whole thing, the tax man would take a huge chunk of it. So in essence, although he's part of this company, I don't really want to mention the company itself, but he's taken a back seat in the company. He's sort of like taken a easier role. He's let his business partner take the helm and just supporting it and doing other bits and pieces. Now, not all those opportunities are open to everybody, but the point being is those sort of opportunities are the sort of things you've got to see if you have a life-changing thing. But there are many things out there that put people off making the changes, and this is one of the things I want to say, is a lot of people get stuck in ruts. In society, it's developed around sheeple, people that just follow each other. What you'll have is a lot of people will say they can't do, won't do, worried about what ifs, and all this sort of stuff that prevent them moving themselves forward. It's a bit like a friend of mine's wanting to do a food truck. Now, his wife already has her business, but she sees that he won't commit to it and keep to it. So he is like not a happy bunny because of that. He wants the food truck and stuff because he can see that it takes him away from what he used to do, which is a job he really didn't like. He's been doing the same sort of work for 20 odd years. He does have a background in catering and cooking through family, but it will give him a transition to move into something new. Now, he'll tell me his wife stopped him doing it, and many other reasons not to do it. Now, my view on it, and this is what I said to him, well, you can either take that view or take the opposite view. The view is she doesn't want you getting any finance on it. So if she doesn't want any finance, you've got to pay for it. So how do you pay for it? Do you do extra overtime at work? Do you find another way to generate some other income? Or do you just sit there and moan about your wife? That's a prime example, because that is where you've got to make the decision. You can just sit there and moan and use the objections to stop you doing it, or you simply go, right, okay, she doesn't want me getting any more finance. She wants me to do this off my own back. And it'll also show that I'm committed to doing it because I've paid for it myself. I've done my extra work or I've generated another income to make it happen. And that's basically the yin and yang of it. Either you give up or you make it happen. And it's what separates a lot of people. It is. I mean, you've got to bear in mind a lot of the family commitments and stuff that we get into often prevent us doing stuff we wish we had done. In life, when you get older, you sit and see sometimes that there are many things you will regret that you didn't do, rather than things that you regret you did. So in essence, you're more likely to regret something you never did to stuff you did do. Because the thing, if you do something right or wrong, you get experience from it. If you never do it, you think, what if that I did that? What if I'd been this? And I've seen it at a friend's wedding where there's a restaurant, and the restaurant was a very successful restaurant to the point you had to book months in advance. Years ago, one of the guys at the wedding got offered a job there, and he never took it. He took the job to work in his father's fish and chip shop. So he's gone back there 20 years later, And he's seeing that if he'd gone into that position then, he would have actually been at least running that restaurant that he really liked. And these are the sort of important things you've got to look at. Is he sat there looking at, wow, this is where I would have loved to have been. And I could have done this, but instead I went into my father's fish and chip shop. There are many things in life that do that. But you can reduce a lot of the problems if you sit and analyze them. And this is how you deal with it. It's like me at the moment. I'm trying to work my way around staying in Spain full time. I've got a contract that may come up, which is for 6 months in the UK. Now, I'm trying to avoid doing it unless I have to. But at the same time, if I did do it, it generates more cash revenue for Spain for the long term, because it's much easier to make cash on the contracting. But B, if I can find some stuff between confirmation and going through all the review stuff, I will probably just stay in Spain. So for me, it's a case of I'm doing both. Neither of them are a negative, because if I do 6 months in the UK, 6 months money in the UK gives me about another 18 months in Spain without having to do anything. But the other option on that is I've already banked some money this year, and if I banked another 18 months money over that 6 months period, that's a fair chunk of change to actually start a bricks and mortar business here, or buy a property to rent out, or do something else. So the point is, it's always about moving forward. The other option is just go, oh, well, I don't speak Spanish, I can't get a job here, they don't like Brits or whatever. It's not a case they don't like Brits, by the way. It's a case of, if you spoke Spanish fluently, they couldn't care less. I see a lot of Brits do that. They don't like the Brits. It's got nothing to do with it. I mean, I've got to admit, sometimes they don't like the Brits, but it's normally around the drunkenness and rowdiness. But Spanish are quite loud anyway. It's a bit like the other day, somebody was asking about, are they anti-Brexit or whatever. Spanish predominantly couldn't care less about Brexit. They don't even understand why the UK's leaving it. From the people I've spoken to, they really don't care. They've got enough issues with Catalonia, Basque Country and other stuff. They don't really care about it. And this is the funny thing. You get people trying to suck another nation into their politics. And this is the point. A lot of this stuff that we get in life is doing that, which adds this in. A lot of the stuff we get around us is sucking our time away, is wasting our time. You look at stuff around people complaining or pro-Trump and all this stuff. Do you know what? It's just negative media. It's false media. It's useless media. It has no productivity. It's got nothing positive behind it. It is just to create tit-for-tat arguments. Don't waste your time on it. That's my best advice. I mean, I know, I think it was, I get my books mixed up sometimes, but basically we're talking about politics, and unless you're actually going to do something in politics, the majority of it, don't waste your time on. It just takes up a lot of time to discuss things that you have no control over, often would never have a vote on anyway. And ultimately, it's a bit like the UK right now, where they're trying to decide who's going to be the next Prime Minister of the UK, or head of Conservatives or whatever. Do you know what? I couldn't care less, because A, got no control over it. B, I wouldn't vote any of them in. But ultimately, they are not important to me. What's important is my life, what I do in Spain, and the same thing is yourself. Is the important bits is what you do with your life. A lot of the things we do is the fact as being entrepreneurs, people that live abroad, etc. We're already outside the realms of the sheeple by the fact of being able to disconnect from a lot of this stuff. One of the things I do recommend is, if you have too much time on your hands, which in some cases people do, is find something productive to do with it. Improve your skills, generate a second income, or do something that can actually push you forward and accelerate you, because those are the important things. Those are the things that will get you ahead in life. But also, even if, for example, you're a very hands-on person work-wise, if you have other revenue streams that are generated online, digital nomad style, etc., you may have an accident at work. Just saying. But you've then got something to fall back on. You may have something that becomes worth more than your pension. You may have something that's a positive aspect change long term as well. You could use that money for investments. Anyway, thanks for watching.